because at the beginning of this, he justified it and says, I need a mandate from the people. And he was talking about doing COVID level spending again, right? He wants to go to the government and say, let's borrow, or to the bank and borrow a bunch of money. We want to spend to try to get ourselves out of this tariff. Now, here's the one problem. He just got elected and he told the voters, if you elect me, I am going to do this spending. I am going to have stimulus type of spending to fight these tariffs in the same way that I did with COVID. And if it blows up in our face, remember, voters, you asked for it, you wanted it, and you gave me the mandate to do it. So you, voter, you're the one to blame. And that's a big motivation as a premier who wants to have a legacy.
And right up now, I believe we have Tom Marazzo of the Ontario Party, the president of the Ontario Party. Hey, Tom, how you doing there?
I'm good, David. It's nice to talk to you. I think this is technically the first time we've ever done a Rebel News interview together.
Well, you know what they say, Tom, you always remember your first time, right? Anyway, so Tom, I had the pleasure of speaking with your colleague, Derek Sloan, a couple of segments ago. And again, as one of the things I ponder is why Ontarians are going to the polls in the middle of a brutal winter. In the first place, we know that Doug Ford says he needs a mandate to fight against Donald Trump and his tariffs. I would argue he had a mandate. He had a supermajority government. He had an election a year and a half away, which is an eternity. What is your take, Tom? Is this political opportunism? The Ford PCs looked at the polls. They looked quite rosy. They looked at the strategy of running against somebody who's not even on the ballot, namely U.S. President Donald Trump. And, well, the early numbers are indicating that that strategy paid off. But I don't know, to me, something just doesn't feel right about this, Tom.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think everybody was quite surprised that Doug Ford decided to go to the polls this early, given the fact that, yes, he was in his second majority government and looking at a third. You know, a lot of people are speculating as to why he would do this because it clearly doesn't make sense. He's in no different of a position today than he was actually yesterday. So this waste of people's time and an extraordinary amount of money to call an election at this time of year when he still had another year and a half to the next scheduled election or general election, it's a mystery to most people. I think the only rumor that I've actually heard prior to this is that we were kind of hearing rumors he was looking at doing a spring election. And the only rumor we actually heard was that he was thinking about actually retiring, but he wanted to extend out the party's sort of legacy, right? So if he were to go to the spring, he retired, he could go into a leadership shortly after, finally step down and pass the party off to someone else. I don't know whether that's true or not. But we were all spending quite a lot of time trying to figure out what was the upside to him calling an election now. And the other thing is we think maybe he was just trying to keep all of the, let's say, alternative or newer political parties off guard and not allow them to mobilize and have an election or be successful in the election. And by the way, Bobby Ann Brady, congratulations to her. That's the second time. It can be done. So the proof is in her. You can do this.
What isn't that a great story? The Bobby Ann Brady story. And you're right. I guess Bobby Ann Brady, in certain respects, Tom, that's an inspiration for independent candidates, startup political parties such as your own. And what you just said, it can be done. But, it's funny when you mentioned, I have to admit, I did not hear about Doug Ford musing about retirement. I heard quite the opposite. The other day, he said he wanted to be premier forever, which kind of brings to mind images of Napoleon crowning himself. But, what does that tell you about Doug Ford?
Well, I think he's probably just, he's a human being. He's probably just emotional about the fact that he was leading in the polls and he was looking at getting another majority. And of course, he's going to say that when he's, Ontarians are going to the polls. He's not going to say, "Oh, I'm glad you're voting for me, but I'm out of here soon." Like obviously he's towing his own party line to be successful for the party. Uh, but at the end of the day, I think that this was all calculated, obviously, but I don't think Ontarians are any better off they are after going through this whole election cycle for no apparent reason that anybody can determine why he would do this now. Now he says it's because of the tariffs, but Doug Ford was given a 30-day extension by President Trump, which kind of took away his whole tariff narrative to a certain degree. But I'm a little. My personal opinion on this whole tariff idea that he called an election because of the tariffs, I think is fundamentally wrong. I think that if you want to look at the leadership of all the premiers across Canada, I would argue that right now, Premier Danielle Smith has the best approach when working with the Americans to solve real problems. And if you look at all four of the legacy political parties in Ontario, if you look at their platforms, they're all posturing to fight the Americans as opposed to sharing in our rich history between the two countries of cooperation and working together to create strong economies in both countries as well as provinces and states. But you don't see that coming from them. And unfortunately, not a lot of people got an opportunity to hear what some of the other alternative parties had to say, because in typical legacy media fashion, we all got stonewalled and completely shut out.
Which is a shame, and all the more reason I'm happy that you've made some time to come on here with us at Rebel News. But I do agree. I think Danielle Smith has been a superstar out there of late, and to me, Danielle Smith is that rarefied commodity in politics, Tom, genuine. I feel that she says what she means and she means what she says. And I have to tell you, yes, as an Ontarian and someone who leans right of center, I have voted PC in the past, but I didn't vote PC in this election. I did not vote PC in the 2022 election. And Tom, this might surprise you, not even in 2018, after years of vandalism by the McGuinty Win Liberals. And I'll tell you why. My spidey senses were tingling about Doug Ford in terms of being genuine all the way back to 2018. And I think the best example is during the leadership convention after Patrick Brown was ousted in January of 2018, and that there was less than 6 months till the provincial election. As you know, Tanya Ann Allen Granick was running as leader, didn't have much of a hope of being leader, but when she realized that, had her delegates go towards Doug Ford. If they didn't, it was such a photo finish, Doug Ford would have lost to Christine Elliott. Christine Elliott would have been the Premier of Ontario. And of course, Tanya Granick Allen, her plans were to run as an MPP in Mississauga. And then, what do you know? Some, social media postings that were allegedly two-third rail to handle emerged, and bang, Tanya Allen Granick, the kingmaker, well, she was canceled, right? And, even though I have no skin in the game, I felt like it was a punch in the stomach to me. I went, wait a minute, the kingmaker gets disposed of like a used Kleenex because what have you done for me lately because of, some nonsense on social media from over a decade ago. So, Tom, that was my, canary in the coal mine indicator that I don't think these Doug Ford PCs are saying, how they're advertising themselves. I don't think they come as advertised.
No, and I agree with that. And I know Tanya Granick Allen very well. I think she's an exceptional Canadian. She's an exceptional Ontarian. She's very dedicated to her causes. She's dedicated to her family. She's dedicated to the province. And she's proven that time and again. And yet when you see somebody of that quality be ousted, for me, listen, I had never had any aspirations of being involved in politics. I had, other dreams. I wanted to stay in the military. I wanted to teach eventually. This is what I wanted to do with my life. But what I learned over the last 4 to 5 years is that we need more Canadians with integrity, with principles, with values that align with what Canada was supposed to be about. I'm going to be 52 this year, and I know where I come from. I know the morals, the ethics, and the values that I learned in this country as a member of the Canadian Forces, and as a teacher, and just what it means to be a good person. I think I learned that in Ontario, but now we're looking at a political class of people that have so far diverged from that you can't recognize the current cohort of political uh, mainstream parties. They don't seem to be governing according to what their values are. Conservatives don't. I don't care what anyone says. Conservatives, with the exception maybe of Alberta, do not. They run for elections as conservatives, but they always govern as liberals. Okay, we see this time and again, over and over and over. And I look at a guy like Derek Sloan. Derek Sloan is a man of integrity. He's a man of principle. He's the reason I joined the Ontario Party, and also that the Ontario Party promises were committed to never whipping votes, so that the constituents always had a vote in their MPPs as representatives. Derek has a long history of telling truth to power and standing up for what's right, and has morals, ethics, and values. And he's a deeply spiritual, religious man who, relies on freedom, family, and faith to guide him. And I look at Derek and then I compare him to a guy like Doug Ford. Doug Ford bragged during the pandemic about being one of the most restrictive elected officials in all of North America. And I am disheartened to say the fact that on two occasions since the pandemic has started and ended, and it's doubtful whether there was actually a pandemic. But what's a little bit disheartening is you see a lot of great Canadians, a lot of great Ontarians out there trying to fight to make a difference. But over and over and over, the electorate seems to keep rewarding their domestic abuser. And this is Doug Ford and his entire party. And he runs that party like a dictator, because if you go against any of his dictates, you're gone out of his party, out of the caucus. That's it. So MPPs, Tom, I just want to add, MPPs in his party, they're not MPPs. Make no mistake. They're high-paid administrative assistants inside different constituencies for the dictates of Doug Ford. And it looks like we're about to give him a third majority government to be a dictator again. And I'm really disappointed, honestly, in the Ontario voters for that.
That's a great assessment. I can tell you, Tom, I can never remember an election where so many candidates running under the PC banner where it's like they had sworn an oath of silence in terms of media access. You couldn't get interviews. You couldn't get them to say anything. They weren't making themselves available for scrums. Everything was so controlled. But more than that, to your earlier point, I'm not kidding, Tom. I can't tell the difference between this PC party and the McGuinty-Wynne Liberals during their reign. And I'm talking whether it's the sex ed curriculum, which this party promised to rein in. I would argue it's worse than ever. Whether on the fiscal side, we have a record deficit and debt. I mean, they almost make McGuinty-Wynne Liberals look like fiscal conservatives. So, tell me, where is there? I mean, I don't see it. It reminds me of back in the 70s, there was an old commercial for ABC laundry detergent. That was the bargain brand. And the tagline was, they would show the ABC detergent shirt and the national brand leading detergent shirt. And the housewife would say, I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? Tom, I can't tell the difference. Last word goes to you, my friend.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. I absolutely agree with that. And here's the one thing I want to say about calling the election now, because at the beginning of this, he justified it and says, I need a mandate from the people. And he was talking about doing COVID level spending again, right? He wants to go to the government and say, let's borrow to the bank and borrow a bunch of money. We want to spend to try to get ourselves out of this tariff. Now, here's the one problem. just got elected and he told the voters, if you elect me, I am going to do this spending. I am going to have stimulus type of spending to fight these tariffs in the same way that I did with COVID. And if it blows up in our face, remember, voters, you asked for it, you wanted it, and you gave me the mandate to do it. So you, voter, you're the one to blame. And that's a big motivation as a premier who wants to have a legacy.
Unbelievable. It's almost the same as what Mark Carney said last week when he was bragging about if he needs to use the Emergencies Act to get his mandate as Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Here on the third anniversary of the brutal shutdown of the Freedom Convoy, sometimes you got to wonder, Tom, if these people are just absolutely tone deaf or don't know how to read a room. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming on. Good luck with the Ontario Party. And hey, don't be a stranger. Let's have future interviews as you make progress in the province of Ontario.
I'd love to. Thanks, David.
Okay, thank you so much. And folks, that was Tom Marazzo, the Ontario Party president.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.